Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the breakout session on Advocacy, Strategies for Change. I'm Brandall C. Jones, the moderator of this conversation. Well, thank you. My primary role as an arts administrator is serving as connectivity director for Kenny Leon's True Colors Theater Company in Atlanta, Georgia, and I am also proud to be an alum of the ISPA Fellows Program. Yes. Woo! All right, fellows. I'm absolutely delighted that you all have decided to join us for this necessary conversation. And before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to provide just a bit of context for us. UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, defines artistic freedom as the freedom to imagine, create, and distribute diverse cultural expressions free of governmental censorship, political interference, or the pressures of non-state actors. It includes the right of all citizens to have access to these works and is essential for the well-being of societies. Now, as many of you know, artistic freedom has been increasingly under attack throughout many regions of the world over recent years, including right here in the US. UNESCO reported in 2023 that, quote, in 2021, 1,200 attacks were perpetrated against artists worldwide, with 39 of them losing their lives, end quote. And just last month, UNESCO's World Trends in Freedom of Expression and Media Development report determined that, quote, freedom of expression is declining faster today than at any point in the last 12 years. Freedom of expression has dropped globally by 10% since 2012, an erosion not seen since the World Wars and the Cold War era, end quote. So during this time of rising efforts to quell artistic freedom and freedom of expression in many regions throughout the globe, our conversation here today could not be more pressing and necessary. Our discussion will center on three strategies. 1, coalition building. 2, building community with like-minded individuals. And 3, providing a platform of visibility for overlooked groups. Joining me here on stage are some phenomenal leaders who are serving on the front lines of advocacy, both as defenders of artists' rights, as well as uplifters of the narratives of overlooked groups. To my left, Anna Corbett has come all the way from Aotearoa, New Zealand, to be with us. She is the producer and co-founder of the Upu Collective, and Anna is also a performer on stage and screen, and is recognized as one of Aotearoa's leading voiceover artists. Marie Foll has come from Belgium. She co-initiated Live Arts Lab in 2025. Her past experience includes working with artist residencies and the music industry via Key Change and One Voice for European Music. Ashley Tucker, from right here in New York City, serves as co-executive director of the Artistic Freedom Initiative. Her past work experience includes the United Nations Human Rights Committee in Geneva, as well as serving the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights. Please welcome our panelists. Following our conversation, we will have plenty of time to receive your questions. So let's get started by getting to know a bit more about the advocacy work of our panelists. Marie, last year you played a pivotal role in the initiation of the Live Arts Lab workshops series in Europe. The group outlines 2 problems that it claims are impeding progress, what it quotes as progress toward a fairer and more equitable global cultural system in the live arts. There are two problems it outlines. 1, how cultural policy is developed, and 2, the cultural industry's efforts to become more equitable. The Live Arts Lab is a great example, I think, of coalition building. So what was the inspiration that led to the creation of Live Arts Lab, and how does it build coalitions to shape policies and laws that support and protect artists?
Thank you very much for this question, Brandall. So this is a very vast question to start with. I've been working in the field of cultural policy in Europe for about 15 years, both for cultural agencies, being employed and then freelance. And back in 2018, 19, I started with Key Change, so on gender equity in the music industry, and I really went way more in depth into how do we create a fairer platform for a very specific issue. So really focusing on gender, focusing on one subsector of the performing arts, so with music. And what that taught me first, that it's really necessary to all come together and to uplift voices, and that's another point you want to touch upon, but I'm bringing that up because I did that for 6 years, and it was both absolutely amazing to be able to bring people further, to give them a platform, to give them a voice, but also extremely frustrating because after 6 years, and when you look at gender equality, when you hear about all the reports and all the UNESCO report on that topic specifically, they do say that we will achieve gender equality in over 100 years. So basically, in 6 years, nothing changed. And it became extremely frustrating. And just this moment, I'm like, okay, why am I doing this? Who am I talking to? How do I bring that to the next step? And it felt extremely isolating as well, because I was like, okay, I'm uplifting those voices and really trying my best, but I am all alone. Everyone is like, you're doing great work. And at the end of the day, I'm still going home and being like, I didn't change a thing. And so with that in mind, and together with Matthew Covey, who runs Tamisdat, and Covey Law, who is a lawyer here in New York and works on mobility of artists, and we'll know each other for a long time. We do a lot of panels together on freedom of mobility for the arts and culture sector, and we're both extremely frustrated we see that going nowhere. We do the same speech over and over again, and nobody listens. So instead of trying once again to shake our fist in the air and be like, we need to do something, we decided to bring other advocates together. And I see quite a few of them today in the room, so that's really, really fantastic. And it's really this idea of, okay, like there are tools, the policy sector and the UNESCO especially is trying very hard to bring conventions, to bring international law further. So from top down, you have a lot of stuff being done, but nobody in the sector knows about it. And everyone in the sector is busy trying to do something, trying to achieve change in their specific corner. But as I was feeling with Key Change, everyone is really isolated. So trying to bridge those two, we decided to create this Live Arts Lab series of workshops using the Fair Culture Charter, which is an initiative of UNESCO Germany, inspired by fair trade, to bring the idea of fair trade into the cultural sector. And we're like, okay, that's a fascinating framework, but like, how does it work? And can we use this to just actually bring people together who are advocates? We need that support, we need that coalition of ideas, of people, of energy to not feel so isolated in their specific area. And everyone that we bring together, so we decided to make those workshops for 32 people. It's on invitation only, and we focus on the live arts broadly. So we did one on music, we did one on Monday on theater, and the idea is really like to bring advocates together, for them to share a common language, to hear about other initiatives, and to imagine how we can work together, how we can uplift each other, and just listen to each other kindly in one room. And once we leave the room, know that those other people exist. Know that when I need to put my bag down to just rest for one evening and vent, and I'm trying to moderate my language here, vent about this policymaker who is not listening, this funder who dropped you all of a sudden because the policy has changed, this artist who you have been championing and is just trashing your program because they have to say something and you're like, not today, come on. Like, no, you're just trashing my whole program for the whole year because you've decided to say one thing. So when you have to put your back down and just find someone to talk to, we created that kind of a very informal space for people to find each other. And hopefully this will lead to more. This will lead to initiatives being developed for us to feed back to policy. This is a long-term goal, and we'll talk further, I think, about this timing. But the idea, first of all, comes out of this frustration of nothing really moving and this hope that by coming together, by building those coalitions over time, and we don't have the means of ISPA with this wonderful fellowship, but like on a smaller level, on what we can do to just make sure that our efforts are not isolated in our corner, but that we can continue drawing from my network, from Matthew's network, and make sure that all of this, that we find our peers and that we find that rest in order to continue every day to go on stage and say those things.
Excellent, and I love it as you're saying. The Live Arts Lab, it's not just to better serve the communities, but it's also for the leaders who are serving them.
Very much.
A great example of coalition building. Anna, your work as co-founder, producer, and performer, that's a lot of hats, of UPU Collective is a model of the strategy to provide a platform of visibility for overlooked groups. Can you tell us about the lack of visibility for Pacific communities that inspired the UPU Collective, and how you and your colleagues have shaped the production into a highly visible showcase of that community?
Sure. Marolele, everyone. A little bit of context around our show, UPU, just so you can understand my lens to advocacy. Our show, UPU, so UPU means word in many languages in the Pacific. It is a theatrical work built from the poetry of 28 published, award-winning, internationally recognized poets from our ocean, Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, or known to you as the Pacific Ocean. So we've woven that into a single theatre work, and it offers this incredible collection of voices, snapshot of stories and histories from our ocean. Basically, the co-creators, Facilitator, Amosa, and Grace Iwashita-Taylor, she is a poet herself, and she had done a theatre show with Fassi with her own poetry. And it was that point that Fassi realised how potent poetry could be when it was matched with theatre. And so then he started looking into all the incredible, the plethora of amazing literature, Pacific literature, that was on offer, but sitting in the library on a shelf somewhere. And so from that idea, he's like, how about we get all of these amazing pieces of poetry, put them on stage, put all the theatrical tricks over it, and make a show. So that was the beginning of UPU. So in terms of advocacy, the advocacy is in these incredible poets' work, and I feel like my job as the producer is to support that. So the advocacy is led through this incredible work and the words of the poets. And for the last 5 years, this has been the first theatre show that I've ever produced. So I just learnt on the go. I'm also in the show. I started as an actor. My son was 7 months old when we did the development season of the show. He's now 8. And I have just learnt, I had a strategy at the beginning, a plan of what to do, and I've just, kind of asked lots of questions, and we are now kind of at the point we're about to take it to Canada for a 4-week international tour to 8 different centres. It's the biggest Pacific theatre work ever to be toured in Canada, so
Well, and I think that's just amazing.
I know.
Just amazing.
I can't believe it.
And I think the beauty of this is that this is a community that is not often showcased.
No, and I think I was so, that's why I said yes to producing it, because I had done a little bit of film production with my acting background, and the co-creators had known that. So they asked me would I consider producing this show. And because I knew that it was such an important work, and it just represented, our Sea of Islands is connected by the largest body of water on Earth, like, where is our representation? And I just thought, this is, the work that needs to be seen. And it just speaks so beautifully. It's to who we are, and it's, a wonderful show. So I said yes. That's 5 years in.
From stories that are sitting in the library to now highly visible and representing a community that has been fighting so much to have their voices to have their voices heard. Just amazing, Anna, just amazing. Well, Ashley, the Artistic Freedom Initiative offers a range of services to international artists, from legal representation to resettlement assistance to producing. So AFI employs practically all of the strategies I think I've mentioned. I'm particularly interested in learning more about AFI's resettlement program, as the components of it serve as a great model of an effective way to employ the strategy of building community with like-minded individuals. Can you tell us a bit more about the work of AFI?
Sure. Thank you, and thank you all for having me. Artistic Freedom Initiative is a New York City-based nonprofit. Some of you may know us, but I imagine that many of you don't. Just for a little bit of context, we are led by immigration and human rights attorneys, and our mission is to provide pro bono immigration representation and resettlement assistance, as well as advocacy for international artists who have experienced persecution, censorship, and forced displacement, usually as a result of their work, but often too because of their identities or their political beliefs. We have been around for about 10 years, and since our inception, we've been able to support around 4,400 at-risk artists and their dependent family members, and provided about $6.5 million in pro bono immigration representation and resettlement assistance. The resettlement program that you mentioned is one of 4 flagship programs. We really do try to take a holistic approach to supporting artists. So as immigration and human rights attorneys, we do provide that immigration representation. The resettlement assistance is really meant to meet the artists where they're at when they come here to the United States in particular, but we also support artists in Europe as well. We create opportunities and platforms for the artists in our network to showcase their work. So we curate and produce events in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Europe as well. So the opportunity is there for the artists to plug in to, the performing arts or visual arts or, writing community, et cetera. And our most recent program is our advocacy program, which I think maybe we'll talk a little bit about later, but this is a more traditional global policy and advocacy program that's really focused on research and analysis around legal and bureaucratic mechanisms that are being used around the world to suppress artistic freedom. And we're going to be launching a new advocacy tool this month, which again, I'll mention later, but that is focused on what we're seeing happening here in the US in particular. With respect to our resettlement program specifically, it's really quite broad ranging. We do a lot of ad hoc matching for the artists in our network, in the sense that they'll come to us if they need assistance opening a bank account or getting a photo ID or understanding their health insurance options or where they go to understand how to file their taxes, which, for many of us who have been here all our lives is a challenge. So we are there, to support them through that process. But we also do a lot of employment, fellowship, grant-related matching. We'll assist artists with applications. We co-create fellowships at universities like this, UPenn, Harvard, Bennington. We have co-created fellowships for artists in our network at the Met and the Smithsonian and Juilliard as well. These are paid, typically year-long placements where the artists have the opportunity to obviously earn an income, but in addition to that, to really develop their creative and artistic careers in a very tailored and intentional way. Not to mention, of course, the network building. We run a residency program as well here in New York City. That is, again, a holistic approach to residency programming for at-risk artists specifically, and it's a long-term one-year placement, and it comes with the legal services that AFI provides. Up until recently, we were able to provide a free live-work studio for the artists for a year at Westbeth Artist Housing Community. Some of you may be familiar. It's in the West Village in Manhattan. And we bring on, speaking of coalition building, partners who are able to provide very tailored, customized professional development for the artists based on their discipline throughout the course of the year. We have recently this year launched the Artist Community Network, which is a bit of an innovation on the traditional residency program. This was really in response to us hearing from our artist in residence alumni saying that, the experience was wonderful for them, but one thing they felt like they were really missing was a sense of peer-to-peer community building with their fellow, artists at risk who have similar shared lived experiences. So the Artist Community Network is also a year-long placement. We are piloting it right now with 6 artists in our network, all of whom are based in New York. It's a paid engagement with us, and throughout that year, these artists are given the opportunity to really build, co-create, collaborate around creating an ecosystem that is led by them and is built around the goals that they set out for themselves for the year. They work very closely in 2 disciplinary pods of 3, a visual arts pod and a writer's pod, but the full cohort also meets regularly. So they're working together and really providing peer-to-peer knowledge sharing, resource sharing, mentorship, creating network building opportunities for each other. In addition to that, we have brought in local professional development partners to work with each pod on the theater side and on the visual arts side. So that's the National Queer Theater. Some of you may be familiar with them. They are also here in New York. They're amazing. And Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts supporting the visual artists. And then we have 1 professional development partner training the entire cohort. That's the Art Action Foundation, and they are training our artists up on digital archiving. Art Action Foundation is co-founded and led by Nadia Tolokonnikova from Pussy Riot. So it's been amazing for our artists to be able to learn from her and her experiences. So, you know, this really has been about community building, coalition building and community building, and less about kind of the individual artist experience per se. So we're trying to do a lot under the resettlement program.
That's just remarkable. And I love that the work of AFI does focus on the whole artist, taking such a holistic approach. Because, of course, the needs of artists in these circumstances are so broad. So it's a great model of that. So each of you are pursuing various strategies to better serve artists who are either silenced or needing greater visibility. I'm curious to know, how do you track your progress towards achieving these strategies?
Why? You're in the middle, Marie. You gotta go.
Exactly. So, as I briefly said, so I've worked on advocacy for 15 years in many different areas, be it on mobility of artists or more broadly on fairness, equity, gender equality, these kind of things. And progress is extremely slow. Just let's put it out there. It's barely visible a lot of times. We do get, for the program I ran before with Key Change, for instance, we get public funding from Europe, from Creative Europe, so we have to report on what we've been doing and so on. So you have to monitor the progress. You have to see also what the funding you've gotten has been used to achieve. What has been quite interesting in that part is, as we worked with a lot of artists, a lot of musicians in Key Change, we were very mindful to not use their successes as ours, to really say like, okay, we are uplifting them at one point in their career, but they are part of our community because they are brilliant. So like in terms of artistic development and artistic freedom, like they are doing it, they are doing all the work. So we were very meaningful to not use their success as ours and to really distinguish the stories there. What we've been doing in terms of measuring success, tracking data, so there is a big part of data gathering and making sure that we do that. We have information on how the money is used, how progress on European level has been achieved, how connection has been built, what kind of economic return on investment there is. Like, I mean, there is a full methodology that has been applied within the arts so many times, but we try to change that. And I think a lot of funders in Europe, in any case, and I'm thinking of the Doen Foundation in the Netherlands, have been working very hard on how do we measure and monitor change through storytelling rather than pure hardcore data gathering, because data, you can let it say anything you want ultimately, and it can be reused by other powers, other administrations to say something very different from what you intended to say. So those funders, and we've been quite inspired with Key Change, for instance, to do that as well, are focusing on stories of change and really this storytelling aspect, and really having interviews, really monitoring what artists and giving the word back to artists who have been supported, saying like, okay, what difference did it make? What do you see? Where is the value for you in that network? what changes for you rather than from our perspective. And that has been very useful to change this narrative and to decenter our role as intermediaries and really put it back to uplift those stories rather than, again, trying to get all the credits to us. That being said, it makes it really, really hard for us to fundraise. It makes it really, really hard to take the credits. So this is a very difficult dance, and we have to build those relationships basically with funders, with donors, to make sure that they understand when we do this work, when we uplift stories, this is how we measure success, because those stories can be told. So that's for the key change bit. With the Live Arts Lab, I'm measuring the success in a very, very basic way, just by the fact that people show up to the meeting. If it is relevant, it is successful enough for me. And I think it shows a lot when doing things that challenge the status quo, that are different. The fact that that it finds its audience, that people respond to it, that they're like, okay, well, I will give it a try and I will continue engaging, and that they stay for, like the Live Arts Lab is a very short break. It's a 3 hours conversation plus followed by happy hour just after. And every time we do it, it's a different set of fellow. So we never really have anyone who knows what's going to happen. So that's why, like, if they show up, I'm like, oh, I made it, that's great. But the fact that they stay also for the happy hour, that they want to continue connecting with each other, I'm like, this is my success. The fact that they find each other, that this coalition is being built without me interfering too much, that is success. And again, like, this is on a micro level. On the macro level, in terms of policy change, in terms of really making sure that we advocate for gender equity, that we advocate for artistic freedom, I think because my role is very much as an intermediary, some others would call it as a gatekeeper, the fact that I'm able to build those bridges continuously, that I'm re-invited to certain spaces, that I'm inviting other people to join me, that is how I measure success personally, and that's how I can really make sure that we continue amplifying those messages and that policymakers not only know me, the one person that they knew to identify, but that they know Anna next time, and that it grows and grows, and that this snowball effect really takes place, because we do need this volume in order for things to really change. I was reading something just before I did the Live Arts Lab. Someone shared a Facebook post from Leslie René on this idea, like, it's not about burning everything to the ground, as much as I want to do it sometimes, and especially with politics right now. But it is about proposing alternatives and building alternatives that are strong enough that they become mainstream over time. And so we start very small, and we start with a meeting here and a meeting there, but the success and measuring this is that my alternative, which sounded bonkers to most people a year ago, is like, oh yeah, that's actually interesting for the few people who are paying attention, and it really grows over time, and it becomes something that is what everyone wants to do in 6 months' time or in 20 years' time. That this becomes a viable alternative is, for me, how we will measure success in time.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Ashley or Anna, want to share?
I mean, an obvious measure of success when you're trying to shop a show around is getting it booked.
Yes, yes.
So that's a good measure. I guess I can speak to that. We were lucky enough to get booked to do the Sydney Opera House last year, and we sold that season out, which was also incredible. But I think the way that I measured the success, obviously we wanted to sell it out, but it was really important to me and our company that we had our people in the show, you know, Pacific people living in diaspora, and that we made meaningful connections with people in the wider communities of Sydney. PYT was one of the companies that we connected with. And so we were able to do that by, doing things through the arts markets were a really good way of networking people in the way that we were able to connect. Where am I going with this? I can't remember where I'm going.
All your many successes.
But what was important to me, because we had built this wonderful relationship with Michael Hutchins, who's the First Nations programmer and who was a huge advocate for the show. And for me, after we'd done that, I was like, well, what happens now? Like, what is my responsibility to the rest of my Pacific theatre making community? Yeah. How do we continue this relationship? So I have still kept in contact with him about almost being a bridging producer for more Pacific work to go through the Sydney Opera House so that it's long lasting. You know, for me, success is about people not having to work from scratch, having to build those relationships again. Success is continuing to tour the work to more audiences outside people living in diaspora, general audiences. You know, you look at Canada, where we're going, you know, measuring success is like we're going to like very remote places of Canada, probably where there are no Polynesians. There will definitely be no Polynesians, but they came and saw our show and they understood how important it was for these audiences to see voices from our ocean, and they programmed us. And amazing. I go, well, that's you know, that's amazing. So
it's brilliant.
Yeah,
brilliant. Expanding the tour, expanding partnerships.
Yeah.
And then having the foundation so that others can have something to build on. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I carry that responsibility deeply, and because it takes so much work to get, you know, producers in the room understand the amount of admin. You know, we're not a funded theatre company at all. You know, I'm very lucky that people like my voice and book me to do their ad campaigns for banks and supermarkets, that I'm able to do to this work for Upu Collective. You know, our funding structure is contestable funding, so if we manage to get funding, I can take a little bit of a fee, but, you know, like so many people here will understand that a lot of the time it's, you know, it's hours and hours of unpaid work, but, you know, I do it for the kaupapa, but, you know, 5 years in, it's full noise when you got 2 kids and all the things that everyone knows, but, you know, these are the realities that you're dealing with, but obviously I'm very proud of where we have been able to take this incredible work, but, you know, it's been tricky.
It's been tricky.
Yeah.
It's amazing how quickly the production has expanded. Great, just amazing. Well, Ashley, how do you measure progress?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting thinking about the distinctions between success and progress, really, and I feel like for an organization like ours, ultimately maybe success would look like there's no longer a need for us to exist, but I don't think that we're in danger of that being the case anytime soon, unfortunately. So thinking about maybe progress instead, and Maria, you know, you gave sort of a micro and a macro example, and I think I'll do the same. And at the macro level, I would say maybe just giving a little bit of history of the organization as well, that, you know, as immigration and human rights attorneys, we really founded AFI to address a global gap in support for legal services, specifically for at-risk artists. That's how we began. And in time, it didn't take very long, when we started taking on cases, we started hearing from artists that we were serving, you know, with the legal support, that now that they're here in the United States, you know, where am I gonna stay? Where I'm sleeping on my friend's couch or a friend of a friend, and that's not sustainable. Can you help me, you know, find housing? Or, you know, how do I get a photo ID? Or, you know, the things that I mentioned, you know, I don't understand the healthcare system. So really, our resettlement program was born very organically, and it was in direct response to the artists coming to us with these questions after we had helped them stabilize their legal status. And, you know, as lawyers, this is not really our area of expertise, but we felt like we could, you know, take some responsibility to step into that space. And so, you know, so we did. And then from there, we were hearing from the artists, great, now I'm feeling more settled here, you know, in New York or elsewhere. How can I better plug into the creative community where I am? Where can I show my work? You know, I'm an artist, I want to show my work. Where can I do that? I'm brand new here and I don't really know the ropes. And so, again, we felt like we could step into the space of becoming presenters and producers and partner up with amazing folks like Joe's Pub or the Queen's Museum, you know, Symphony Space, Lincoln Center, to help, you know, get these artists work on stage or, you know, being shown in a museum. So, you know, I think what I'm trying to say here is that for us, I think we have measured progress looking at the expansion of our support in a way that has really centered and just directly responded to the needs and voices of the artists that we serve. And I think that is how we've been able to create this really sort of holistic approach to support, just because we have been listening, essentially. And then at the micro level, I want to bring up the Artist Community Network project that I mentioned that we've been piloting in the last year as well, because as an organization, we've been around for almost 10 years, and we have made a long-term commitment to work with the artists, many of them over the course of many, many years. So we've been with them through, first their P visa and then an O1, and now they've got the green card, and so that doesn't happen with every artist, but we have a lot of stories like that. So the artists that we selected for this pilot, we've known and been working with many of them for years, and the pods are in this kind of structure where there's one artist who's been here for quite a long time, and they are acting as the pod mentor. And then there are two artists who are newer to New York and who are still kind of learning the ropes and resettling and plugging in and trying to build networks. So being able to see artists that we've been working with since 2017, 2018, 2019, now playing this mentorship role for artists that are newer to our network is been such a beautiful experience for all of us, and I think a very personal way that we're able to see the progress that these artists are making professionally, personally, and then now being in positions of leadership to bring along artists who they themselves as mentors maybe didn't have that opportunity, but it has created a really sort of sustainable, I think, approach to growth as progress.
That's amazing. Well, and it's this all an exciting month for AFI, as you are just weeks away from releasing, I should say, a new tool to support artists. Can you talk about the Artistic Freedom Monitor and how it will hopefully advance how we think about how we support artists who are facing these challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So the advocacy program, Global Policy and Advocacy, I mentioned, is our fourth and newest, flagship program. And up until now, we've been doing a lot of research and analysis, as I mentioned, and publishing these country-specific reports on the mechanisms being used to suppress artistic freedom in countries like Hungary and Poland, Slovakia. We've published on Iran, Nicaragua, and Afghanistan as well. And with everything that we've been seeing happening in the United States over the last year especially, we really felt like we needed to respond, and maybe publishing a report wasn't the thing that we wanted to do, but rather how can we make this an ongoing sort of monitoring of what we're seeing unfold in real time. So the Artistic Freedom Monitor, which we'll be launching later this month, is an interactive data platform that essentially is documenting, tracking, and analyzing federal and state laws, policies, and administrative actions here in the US that are curtailing, restricting, or otherwise threatening artistic freedom. Functionally, it is going to look like an interactive map of the United States, so you can click on state by state and see actually what's happening, and also a federal timeline of administrative actions. And so we will be regularly releasing updates, analysis, brief reports, white papers, et cetera, to keep folks informed who are interested in following this. And ultimately, obviously, the hope is that this will be used to influence and shape policy, and by those who are involved in the advocacy world where artistic freedom and artist rights are concerned, that this will be a really helpful tool as well.
Just amazing. And for folks who do want to follow and stay engaged, will it be posted on the website?
Yes, it will be. Our website is artisticfreedominitiative.org, and we have a newsletter that you can subscribe to. We're going to be announcing, everything to do with the monitor in the next couple of weeks. So visit our site, sign up. I hope that you all will find it useful as well.
Yeah, excellent. I have no doubt that it will lead to more coalition building and will become a great organizing tool. So that's excellent, Ashley. So as we know, censorship can show up in a number of ways, from withdrawing critical funding to to policies that effectively block certain groups from accessing critical resources, to outright violence. With a show of hands from the audience, I'm curious to know how many of you have experienced some form of censorship in your work? Wow. Okay, so a good number of you, and it's disheartening to see that so many of you have experienced this. Now, for our audience members joining us from regions that don't have an advocacy organization or group to turn to, and who are already facing censorship or anticipate, some censorship, or just simply have a dire need for greater visibility, where do they begin to find the support to create a group of advocacy? And can you speak to what is at risk for arts communities that don't have any advocacy support?
Okay.
Take your time. No.
I'm going to start something.
Let it sink in.
I think really fortunate to be based in Europe, where this infrastructure has existed for a long time. If it doesn't exist in one community specifically, or in an underserved community, and there are plenty of them in Europe, we do have models in another region, in another field, be it another arts sector. We have unions which are working for a long time, especially after the Second World War. Like, all of them are great by far, but they have been existing, there are systems in place. We have legal system around the status of the artists. So I do feel very fortunate that this has been existing. That being said, we lack critical infrastructure, especially when it comes to advocacy. We don't necessarily have advocates, and people are not necessarily trained or supported to do that. So I think what organizations I've been working with and are often enough networks, and I'm thinking, for instance, of On the Move, which is a cultural mobility information network based out of Brussels, which was created about 25 years ago, of which AFI is a member. I'm a member myself. We come together in order to support the development of certain advocacy initiatives, for instance. We have networks also like Culture Action Europe, which is the advocacy network Europe-wide, in order to really talk to officials to lift up those stories. And On the Move is a member, so I'm a member of On the Move is a member of Culture Action Europe. So we try to kind of do this back and forth between the people who are not otherwise represented and make sure to expand those networks very much. I'm mentioning On the Move specifically because there is a subgroup within that network called Mobility Information Points, which, so Tamizdat is the one for the US, but we have similar organization providing legal information and support in order to facilitate international exchange and mobility. So all the question of visa, work permits, taxation, all the things that you mentioned in terms of, I don't even know how it works, but like someone needs to know. And so we share those resources for free. And what we've been doing with that network is also trying to find and to create mobility info points in countries where there are none. Those problematic of administration are so nation specific that the visa in France and the taxation in France doesn't work in the same way as it does in Poland and so on. And also, and I'm saying all of this as a French person, if you don't speak French, it's really, really hard to access all this information. So we have one in France, and we are like, okay, we have a lot of mobility issue with Italy or with the UK post-Brexit. So we helped, especially in the UK, we came together with other people there. They were like, okay, we need to do something. And so we gave them all the tools, all the knowledge, like this is how we did it in different countries. We shared all our practice and methodology for them to be able to implement it, and for all of us together to continue training ourselves to be relevant to the communities we want to serve. And On the Move is a global network. We are very much trying to take it out of Europe only. We have members now in, I can't remember how many countries, but it has expanded quite a lot. And the idea is to create those mobility info points, for instance, so all the visa, work permit, taxation, social security information, to be able to do that in more countries. So mobility and exchange, and especially when artists are at risk somewhere, that they can find a place and legally go somewhere, and that they are not at risk personally in that way. So once they've relocated, how do you continue what AFI does brilliantly here? How can we expand and share that knowledge to other places that need it? We had a massive influx in Europe of Afghani and Ukrainian artists who relocated, and so to be able to provide that support and not reinvent the wheel. So that's where we try. So if people, individuals, or organizations want to take part in that, On the Move is one of the networks that connects those dots. There are many, many more, and I think depending on which field you work in, I'm thinking also of a great friend of mine. We co-founded the PADA network on producer, for producer internationally to come in as an alliance on, okay, like we need to share tools, we need to share knowledge, and you're the best advocate in your country. How can I make sure that it's easier for you to work in Canada and I can just introduce you to other people? And so I think like that this value of networks in order to know like how can I advocate in my place where there are no advocacy body, where nothing is necessarily structured or official. Those networks are really, for me at least, the key, and that's also where I find my peers and where when I didn't want to do it anymore, someone took over the legacy that it didn't fall into the void. I think this is really where we can connect the dots. And again, like for Europe, I'm really happy to connect all of this and connect to anyone who wants to find the right person to talk to. And I think most of us in that field are really happy, and I think Ashley the same, like to just, you need a contact somewhere, just ask me and I'm happy to open my Rolodex. There is no gatekeeping in that way. If you want to do something, ask and I will just open any gate you want or needs, because I can't do this on my own. And I think anyone working in that field recognizes this very much on just, we want to connect.
I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about not being isolated. So building networks, whether informal or formal, is excellent. Other panelists, and any thoughts on how other leaders can make sure that they have some sort of support when needed?
Yeah, I mean, the network thing, our show wouldn't be where it is without the incredible support of the New Zealand arts market, the Australian arts market, Capicola. Judy's here, I think. I was not shy asking for help because I was new at this, so I surrounded myself with amazing powerhouse mentors, these women who could probably rule the world between themselves, and just listened. You know, the first arts market I went to, I was luckily travelling with some incredible theatre practitioners that had been in the industry for a long time, and I just listened to them share stories about experiences of crying and funding officers begging for money, you know, 10, 15 years ago. These are the pioneers like Nina Nawalawala, who's an incredible Fijian woman. She runs the Conch Theatre. I think her show Vula was the first ever Pacific work to be in the Sydney Opera House 15 years ago. So, you know, I was around these sorts of incredible women that I was listening to try and get the lay of the land, and then having these people as my guiding light, trying to figure out how to move this show and the support of the arts markets as well. And also through the arts market, there is an incredible First Nations cohort that's happening between Aotearoa, Australia and Canada. And they have just been such a supportive network for me as well, and uplifting each other to kind of help each other get our stories out there more. For our Canadian tour, by meeting Margot Kane, who runs Full Circle, an incredible Indigenous company. She had Nathan Mudge, who is a Cook Island Māori, who worked for an Indigenous theatre. This is all the networks. Who worked for an Indigenous festival called the Kiama Festival in Wellington, and he got a secondment by meeting her at that, and was posted in Turtle Island. And I knew him, and he reached out to me when he had heard that we were building a tour in Turtle Island. And so they have offered their support and guidance while we are on their land and waters during our 4-week tour. So all these beautiful connects have really helped us feel supported, and hopefully be able to travel in the most meaningful way possible.
That through line of networks continues, and then mentorship as well.
Yeah.
Ashley, anything you'd like to add?
I mean, I would reiterate the same. I think connection, coalition building, community are all key. I mean, one thing that was coming to mind for me, and this was related to the reports I mentioned that we've published on, various countries where they're seeing a real backsliding in, democracy and artistic freedom. It was very inspiring to interview many of the artists who are on the ground there to understand how they are organizing together and fighting back, and many in underground and sort of subversive ways. And it was just in the context of this question making me think about maybe those who are looking for that type of inspiration or guidance to seek out resources that can sort of outline these types of models and figure out who is around you that could help you build something similar. And not in the sense of in resistance per se, but the coalition model that we built out around our residency program, where it's really, we ran that program for years with $0. Like, it was like AFI was like, okay, we're going to provide the legal services. Residency Unlimited is going to provide the professional development to the artists. Westbeth was able to give us, one live work studio that they didn't charge us for. And so on the back of that, all of us kind of pooled our resources and expertise to create this program that we then ran for years. And eventually we were able to get it funded because we now had a track record and we could show that we'd supported artists. But I think just there are resources out there that, are outlining these different kind of creative models that are resourceful and, community and coalition based. And so I would just maybe suggest looking out for those if somebody is interested in building something.
Yeah, that's great. We see that through line of network of having networks to rely on continuing. Well, now we want to. I love to open it up. We'd love to hear from you. I'm sure you have questions. There are mics on both sides of the theater, and there are mic runners as well. Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Jo Verrant. I run an organisation in the UK called Unlimited. We support disabled artists in the work that they should be doing, and we too don't want to exist. We shouldn't need to be here. We're here because 25% of the population in the UK are disabled people, but we only make up around 8% of arts audiences, arts staff, and way, way less of that in terms of promoted and produced artists. But my question is around how we balance the work that we do and the advocacy that we have to do in order to do the work that we do. So I'm really interested in who pays for the advocacy side of the work. I'm sad that at least 3 times people have mentioned working for nothing. We're talking about organisations and projects and initiatives that are working with those who have the least, and yet we're the ones who are having to give the most in relation to unpaid time. So a brief plug, we've just started the Anti-Exploitation Academy, which is a free online course for organisations primarily to look at where are you exploiting people. In the arts, we exploit artists all the time. The artists are the lifeblood of our industry, and we are not respecting them. But my question is around who pays for advocacy.
Thank you for your question.
You're so right. Burnout is not just a well-being thing. It's very political, I think. Artists cannot advocate if we are burnt out and exhausted. I don't know who should pay for that. Somebody should. It's usually my partner, I think.
I mean, we're a small organization, but I think something that we have really tried to do as leadership is cultivate what we hope is an environment for our staff that is nourishing and not overextending of them, just kind of very basic things like respecting people's time outside of office hours. And the last couple of years, we've implemented a 4-day work week every other week. So folks get a 3-day weekend, and closing the office over the holidays, just to try to prioritize people's rest, because there is a lot that we are asking of them. Maybe just a small example of something we're trying to do.
Just to thank you for your question very much. It's the actual elephant in the room, and it's the one we carry on our back. I had a burnout 2 years ago. That's why I left Key Change, because I just couldn't do it anymore. Because indeed the advocacy part was the cherry on the cake of having to, like, we were running a mentorship program and showcases and international development, and I was doing the fundraising, which is supposed to be part of the job description, but like just writing a grant takes ages, and especially when you write grants for the Creative Europe program, for the one who are from Europe here, like, you know how much pain it is, and the success rate is less than 7%, so the risk of you not getting it is just like, okay, whatever, why am I doing this in the first place? And then your family looks at you like, come on, like, we need to have dinner, and you're like, I just have another thing to write. It's exhausting. It's plain exhausting. I'm very, very fortunate to be based in Belgium, and as a freelancer, I got on sick leave, and I got paid from day one as having sick leave, which is very rare. I was living in the Netherlands before. The Netherlands doesn't have that. So it's not only like, oh, Europe is beautiful. No, even different European countries don't do that. France doesn't. I am technically on invalidity and doing my project right now because the Belgian government is supportive enough that I can work part-time as a therapeutic part-time to be able to go back to work. So I'm using this parallel system to just get back to the stuff I want to do and have enough energy to be able to be paid eventually again. But for now, it's like, well, I'm reinventing my own wheel. So I don't really have a good answer for you at all. I think what has been really, really complex, and I think the more we advocate, the more we are present in that space, the more we want to implement great practices, the more we want to pay people, the more we want to make sure that we don't ask people to travel to our event without paying them, that we try to pay for their time when we can. And there are a lot of impossibilities where we raise the bar for ourselves so high that it's actually absolutely not workable. We put the level of expectation and responsibility. I mean, I heard my two colleagues talk about it. I feel the responsibility to do this. At this point, I don't feel the responsibility to do it anymore. I do it, and when I need to go home and close my computer, I'm like, it's enough. And it's been, I had to crash and burn for 2 years in order to get to that realization. So like, while I encourage all of you to do advocacy, also just don't, if it's too much, just do something else. Like, really, we have so many people who leave the industry, and that was very, very present in gender equity in music. We have so many people leaving the industry around 30 because it's nightlife, and that goes for all the performing arts. It goes contrary to having a family because you can't respect time. You have to travel all the time. I mean, your partner might not be on board with that, or your family or whatever. So already our working conditions are so hard and so precarious that this is hard enough to do the work without the advocacy. So when you add advocacy, it's just like, okay, great, I'm gonna do that. I don't want to be this being a depressive speech at all. Like, there is, I think, and again, we go back to this coalition building, this peer building, this system where we tender resources rather than go with money as much as we can, where it makes sense. I do advocate for fairness very much, and I think time needs to be paid for paid work. There are plenty of initiative and advocacy initiative working on this. I'm thinking of paying artists in the UK, which has been really formative throughout the EU, or Wage here in the US, to make sure that we pay artists, that there is a fair payment, that we discuss those initiatives. And so there is possibility, there is coming together, there is unions, and again, like, we have to claim our unions back, and that's their freaking job. Sorry, I'm, again, really trying really hard to be polite here. We have to claim that they work for us. They are paid, we pay our dues, they have to work for us. Same thing with government, we pay their salaries. I know this becomes way more political, but in terms of local administration, they have to do the work. We have to hold them to account to do the freaking work. And it goes on. And I think this is where we can learn from each other, because we have all, here or there, run into an adversarial administration, a country that doesn't want us, the crisis that is happening right here in the US. I mean, we are here, I'm going to talk about here. Other countries have experienced this. We need to share those resources so you don't have to have the burnout that I have. I can't tell you when to stop doing something because I didn't stop and I crashed. So we can exchange this. This is like, I can share this for free. That's no problem. It's just wait for me having a cigarette outside. We can take for hours. But I think this is really, really essential to just be sure to share the resources we can for free when we can. And then for the rest, indeed, just put the burden where the burden has to be on unions, on organizations that do exist for that purpose, and hold them to account to do their job.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another question? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll have you. Let's see. Why don't we go here first, and then we'll come to you, Rita. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Simon Hinton from Marigong Theatre Company in Australia. I had the great privilege of seeing Upu at the Sydney Opera House. And experiencing what it meant, I think, a little bit, a glimpse of what it meant to those communities to be represented in that institutional, quite intimidating institutional kind of context. And my question is for Anna, really just around, I guess, the intergenerational nature of advocacy and representation for those communities, because I guess it was an interesting experience to see the elders and the aunties and uncles being there, but also then these second and third generation of the diaspora communities, which is a very different kind of connection to culture, especially, given that some of these islands, the very existence of them is a threat. So they're very different for those younger people. And just the kind of, how you hold those different generations in the advocacy and the representation.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cultural way of that you carry doing a show like this is big. But again, the poets and their words, they are my they are the spine, and they give me strength. I feel very comfortable being in this work because I stand behind their incredible words and ideas. And it was so interesting taking a Pacific show to that community, because they look at New Zealand's Pacific community and they see us as very galvanised, and even the creative Pacific community in New Zealand, they see us as very together. And it was when we were connecting with Pacific artists there, they spoke about how they were so grateful to be able to bring Upu there because it brought them together. And also the thing of, I have a wonderful story actually. There was a high school teacher based in Griffith, which I think is about 6 hours drive out of New South Wales. She is a distant cousin of my Tongan mother, and so she had seen the show advertised, and she worked at a high school. Griffith is a big fruit picking community, so a lot of Pacific migrants have ended up in this tiny little town in New South Wales. About 70%, I found out, of the kids at the high school there are Polynesian. And so she hatched this plan. She was like, I've got to get some kids to this show. And so she fundraised, I think, the money to hire a van to bring 12 high school students to Sydney. Some of them had never ever been to Sydney. None of them had been to the Sydney Opera House. I don't even think any of them had even seen a live theatre show. And I met them after doing the work, and it's like that is the real impact of bringing a work like that for her, a New Zealand-born Tongan woman who migrated in the 70s to Australia, teaching the next generation, bringing these kids into this incredible building that they'd never ever been to see their representation, their people on that stage. That was, that made all the all the hours behind my computer and all that struggle. It made that's why we do it. And I don't know if that's answered your question, but
That's beautiful. I love it. That's what it's about.
yeah.
And Rita?
Thank you, Brandall. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Marie. And thank you, Ashley. I don't have a question, but I would like to lend my voice to the topic. My name is Rita Ezenwa-Okoro. I'm the founder and lead visionary of Street Project Foundation in Nigeria. At the heart of the work that we do is advocacy. I mean, you asked the question about who pays for advocacy. That's the only way the arts can survive from where I come from. We don't have the liberty of being funded to do work that's art for art's sake or just expressing yourself, right? And I want to share what I would call an innovation that we created that has possibly been some driving force to be able to get the kind of support that we have to just keep doing the work that we do. It's not enough, but we have to do that. So bringing it into context, Nigeria has celebrated about 25 years of uninterrupted democracy, which is great, right? But what does that mean for the people who years before were in and out of military rule? Is the whole idea of freedom of expression and actively engaging in democracy is limited. And for a population of over 230 million people, where the young population, about 70%, and they are dormant and don't know how to engage in politics or engage in changing and transforming policies and all of that. What came to mind was, so how do we create a culture where our young people are not dormant, where our young people can fully express themselves? And so we then had this big vision, is if we can raise 1 million young people who are able to understand how to use their art forms, music, dance, drama, visual arts, if we're able to raise that critical mass, would we be able to tip the scale in terms of, how they're able to express themselves fully? And we came up with a project called Advocacy, where the whole idea is for 4 to 6 weeks, we're bringing young people together from different parts of the country, and their common language is the arts. And the goal is to come up and create a play that addresses a social issue, a social concern that they care about. And the stage then becomes their protest ground. The stage then becomes their rallying point. The stage then becomes their coalition, where they speak up and not shut up about the injustice that happened. And then my organization then uses its position to be able to bring stakeholders in government, political leaders, community leaders, traditional leaders into the spaces to hear the young people speak to them through the arts. And that way they're able to engage. And a big part of the performances is that after the performance, conversations happen. And I think that it's very important that that engagement happens. One of the shortfalls was like, okay, so how do we truly go beyond creative expression to actually get in the young people to influence policy change, to influence change in their community? And so one of the things that we have deployed is legislative theater, and that came with a collaboration with an organization in Colombia that's forward thinking in the area of research and tracking and trying to understand how the arts can truly impact. And we were able to say, okay, that's the way to go, to integrate legislative theater into the process. Now, doing that and having a model of this nature that now has been replicated in 7 other cities, then gives us, a track record that allows us to say, this is what we've done. and then attracts other funders to say, okay, let's then use your model to be able to now talk about the plights of child domestic workers in Nigeria. So one of the things we did for the first time, we didn't have to write a proposal to get funding to do work because of the track record of creating that model and testing that model out.
Well, and Rita, I just want to say, I think what you're sharing with us is a great example of the through line that our panelists have expressed, which is network building, and specifically in your case, using networks to elevate and support the voices of youth. And I'm sorry I have to, we're almost at time, but I hope we can keep the conversation going at the receptions. And we only have about 2 minutes left, but if we did have one more.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mariam Malmir. I'm contemporary dancer and choreographer from Iran. It was my pleasure. I was in conversation with Ashley Tucker, I think, 4 years ago about my situation that I had to leave the country. I was out of the US at that time. So first of all, before talking everything about art, I would like to bring the situation of Iran right now here. As I think I'm responsible as an artist to have a voice of Iranian people that are being killed right now in the streets for their rights, for even their basic rights before art, before artistic freedom. So that's more important, and I would like to have this opportunity to ask you all. I know you all know about the situation of Iran, and I just want to ask you, please be the voice of Iranian people at this crucial time and be their voice. Thank you. So about, thank you. And thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, wonderful people here. And I want to talk about my situation as exactly as an artist that's forced with displacement, and I had to leave my country because of my job as a dancer, as a female dancer. So after leaving the country, I want to say that for every artist that want to continue their pathway, the important things before even mobility and other artistic residency situations and opportunities is having a home. Because, for an artist who sorry. I'm so sorry. I want to say that I've been, as an artist in this situation, I've been faced with being isolated. When I was in Iran, I was faced with this. I know a lot of brilliant artists in Iran that have been isolated in the country, and they can't work, they can't collaborate, and they can't amplify their voice and their expression. But even as an artist who left the country, wants to continue her paths, I am facing with this isolation as well. When I was in Cyprus, another country, I was being faced with rejecting my visa for artistic projects like IETM or other projects that I had in France. My visa was rejecting, and then I had a chance to come to the US for studying choreography, and then here again I'm facing with isolating. I can't do any collaboration with other countries. So, because if I leave the country, I can't come back here again. So this is the same situation that I had in my country. So, so this need for a home for this kind of artists that are faced with displacement is, I think, more important than everything, because if they want to travel for art, they need to come back to their home, but they can't. So, for example, if I want to, so I'm passionate about collaborate with like Europe in some countries. I have some friends there that I would love to collaborate with them. But if I go, I can't come back and I don't have any home to stay. So yeah, I would like to ask you, not as a question, just I want to bring this issue that like how your organization, like amazing organization, Artistic Freedom Initiatives or other ones, how this kind of organization have power to be impactful, to like for advocacy. So this is very nice title, Advocacy Strategies for Change. So how strategies are helping artists like facing with political and governmental rules, like the rules in the US that are like if you...
Well, yeah. I just want to say I want to thank you for sharing your story. And fortunately, the conference isn't over, so we can keep the conversation going. But sadly, we are out of time here. But thank you all for sharing your stories, your comments. And clearly, there's a lot of conversation that we must continue. I want to thank our panelists for your tireless work to continue to uplift voices and continue to persist amidst the challenges. Let's give our panelists a round of applause.